it's difficult for people to, I think, understand how to manage diabetes from the outside. So even the doctors that I've had over the years, they are typically non-diabetic. So they don't, even if they theoretically understand, how it is, it's difficult for them to actually give you real world advice, so to say. In everyday life, I try to stay away from carbs. It's easier to manage your diabetes. So maybe 200 grams totally on a day, 300 grams. But then in a race setting, you're basically doing 100 grams for each hour. And the only thing that I do is sports drinks and gels. So that's kind of like fueling the fire with gasoline.
That was ultrarunner Marcus Kjellberg, this week on the Outdoor Journal podcast. Marcus is known for taking on 100-mile ultras, the kind of suffering you choose to find out how resilient you are. But this year, Marcus found himself at the intersection of chosen suffering and the kind that arrives uninvited. Over the past decade, the 53-year-old has built a life around going farther into the unknown than most people will ever choose to go. In addition to work and family life, event races at Lavaredo, Snowdonia, Chamonix, and Kjellberg, Sweden have become seasonal rites of passage, rituals for challenge and growth. Marcus also competes with an added layer of difficulty that most ultrarunners never have to consider, managing type 1 diabetes in real time across 20-plus hours of racing. During a race, his continuous glucose monitor becomes another data stream to manage. Its rising and falling trend lines mirror the elevation profile on a mountain ultra course. Both demand constant adjustment, both punish overcorrection, and both require staying calm while the line moves in directions you don't always control. In our chat, we explored how the skills required to manage extreme distance, controlling emotional spikes, making clear decisions under fatigue, and continuing forward into the unknown, became critically relevant when Marcus's wife was diagnosed with cancer this year. If you want to follow Marcus's 100-mile races and see how these battles play out in real time, you can find his race films on his YouTube channel linked below. All right, here we go. I've watched all of your ultra running videos on YouTube, and I'm a huge fan of yours. You're basically one of my ultra running heroes, so thank you very much. It's really personally meaningful for me.
That's great to hear. It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah.
Now, where are you today?
Well, I'm based out of Sweden, so I live a little bit south of Gothenburg on the west coast. So yeah, it's gray and rainy here. So I envy you. I bet you in close to Marbella, right?
Seems like you are like spoiled for ultra running events in Sweden. You have so many that seem close by to you. Has that always been the case, or is that like an up and coming sport?
Well, it's definitely up and coming sport, I would say. I mean, when I started I started running a long time ago, but maybe I switched to trails and ultra running 15 years ago, something like that. And that was at that time, there was, I guess people were running on the trails, but it was not like the brands owned that. They didn't necessarily have a lot of trail assortment, etc. So I think at that time it was very we were exploring the sport and defining the sport in a way. So at one hand you had the barefoot runners at the time, and at the same time Hoka was starting, with their mega big shoes as well. So everybody was trying to figure it out at the time, I think. And maybe, that kind of was the time also when Born to Run was released. And I think if you read that book, you see how people were running barefoot for many days in a row, pretty much on just water. So I think, now it's more defined, on getting more performance and more elite into the sport as well. But back 15 years ago, there were not many races in Sweden. Even, it was very few people that was actually running 100 miles, where now it becomes much bigger, of course, over the last 8 years or so.
And can you tell me a little bit about your athletic background and what was your main sport growing up? Was it mountain biking?
When I was growing up, it was more soccer and ice hockey. So that's what I was doing until I was like maybe 15 years old. And then, school got consumed too much time, so I didn't do so much sports. I actually moved to the States, and I was there for a few summers, staying in the family that were much into mountain biking, triathlon, and those kind of things. So they kind of pushed me out on the trails there, doing mountain biking and stuff. And and one weekend they were going away for this half marathon, and they asked if I wanted to come. I didn't even own a pair of running shoes at the time. So but I borrowed a pair of running shoes, and the longest I run at that time was probably 10K or something like that. So I wasn't really prepared on running but it went okay. So I think I did it in 140, 145, something like that, which was not too bad. And after that, I started to run half marathons and marathons, and that's pretty much what I did for until 2010 or something like that, when I moved more into the trail. So for 15 years at least, I was chasing, kind of the PBs on the half marathon and the marathons on the road. And that went well in the beginning, because then you can always beat your time, but it comes a point where you kind of stagnate and you don't see the improvement, and then it becomes less motivating as well when you don't improve and you don't have the constant improvement and so on. So but then when you move into the trails, then you get more freedom. You cannot really compare times, so you could put the clock away a little bit and just being out there for fun. And I think that's really changed also the way of how I approach running to a large extent.
When did you first get the idea that 100-milers would be possible for you? And why is that the distance that seems to attract you the most?
That slowly grew on me. So I started off when I moved into the trail running, like 15 years ago, something like that. Then of course you could not really do the PBs because you cannot compare like I was used to doing on the marathon, for example. So instead it became like testing your limits in how far you can run. I mean, that's kind of a natural evolution, I guess. So it started off with, the 50K type races, and after a few years, maybe I did the 50 mile. I mean, at this time also, it was not too many races around. There was not too many people, at least in Sweden, that were running the longer races. And then eventually, I remember 2015, I was reading a race report from a friend, and he was doing the GAX 100 miles. And I was just reading this race report. And at the time, maybe I had run 50 miles, but 100 miles seemed just crazy. I mean, who can do that? But still, it's something that you want to do at some point, I guess. And I think my first attempt at 100 mile was 2017. So that was a local race around Gothenburg. I mean, as I mentioned, it was not so much that you could study, and you kind of had to figure it out a little bit more yourself at the time, I would say. But there were some podcasts at least you could listen to and so on. And I really tried to, prepare the best I could for the miler. So I know I had figured it out, so to say. But then once there on the race course, I kind of messed it up, and I actually DNF'd my first attempt. But I think also the DNFs is really where you learn. So that really defines you as well, how you deal with your DNF. Do you walk away, learn from it, or do you just feel devastated from it? So I think, you really have to benefit from your DNFs as well, and approach it differently and so on. So
yeah, I DNF'd my first triathlon that I ever tried, and I just could not wait to get back out there to kind of right the wrong and erase that from my record. Is that how you felt too?
Yeah, so I can tell you that what happened a little bit in that race. So first of all, I started off way too fast, probably. So and this was a local race, which makes it maybe a little bit easier to DNF in a way. So, and my mother, she was super worried about me. So she would show up in the middle of the night, like every so often, and say, is it a really good idea, this? Maybe you should I have the car here, maybe you should come with me. And then eventually I came halfway, and I was feeling awful. Yeah, my legs were like destroyed, and I could not really see myself running another 15 miles. And then of course my mother was there, like, yeah, this is not good. You the legs, you're never gonna make it. and I also had a friend who DNF'd there halfway. He was gonna go home, have a couple of beers and a pizza, whatever. So I was totally convinced by everybody around me that was not a good idea. And at that point, I mean, it's easy to convince yourself also to just quit. But I felt really awful about that, and almost to the point of a little bit depressed, I would say. That you start to doubt, can I really do 100 miles? Do I have what it takes to? So it took a half year, and it was actually Kullamannen. Maybe we'll come into Kullamannen a little bit later, but 2018, I believe, that was my first finish of 100 miles. So that was, of course, very special. And then I think I approach it. I mean, it's a mental game at the end of the day. I mean, it's also a physical game, but mostly it's you have to decide that and also be patient, because in the end of a 100-mile race, you're not moving very quickly, and it feels like an eternity to just do 10K or whatever. But just take your time, and eventually you're going to get there at the finish. So yeah, so it was really good to actually make it 2018 at Kullamannen.
Before your first UTMB race, it seemed like you were a little bit intimidated just by looking at the athletes that were going to be running along with you. Was that the race that you felt like you were stretching your limits the most, or did that come earlier or later?
Where I stretched the most, I mean, I must say that where I stretched the most is probably some of the races I DNF'd, because then you actually meet your limit. So I had one at Emiak. That was my first big mountain race, and I was getting into the second night. It was extremely tough, and I was approaching. It was actually a checkpoint where you could actually sleep. So that was my goal, to get let's say 120K, whatever. So I was approaching that, but then there were some people standing there. They just had this random aid station that they put up, like with water, and they had a table and a couple of chairs. And I tried to sit down on the chair. I completely missed the chair, fell to the ground. And I mean, that's how bad I was, really. And I thought it was like 1 kilometer to this aid station or whatever, to the real aid station. And those people, and they speak Spanish only as well. So the communication was so, but they were like, no, it's at least 5K, which kill you mentally as well, right? You expect 1K. And they just looked at me as like, oh, we're going to drive you down there. You cannot continue. And at that point, I was also very easy to convince. So I jumped into the car and they drove me down. And as soon as I closed the door, I kind of realized this was a big mistake. So I should have just tried to walk it down there and then maybe slept. But at the same time, I was really close to the limit, I would say. So that was probably stretching it the most. But also, when you don't have so much experience, that was my first mountain race. I did so many mistakes leading up to this, like running the downhills too fast. I mean, I didn't do any elevation training before and so on. So I was pretty broken already after 30K or something like that. So struggling a lot in that race.
Can you explain a little bit about how you're able to balance work and family life with training for such a long distances? Because I believe that you're traveling for work, and then you also have the travel aspect of these events as well. So how do you fit it all in?
Yeah, maybe I don't. Depends on who you ask, I guess. But no, but I try to do my training. For example, if they're football practice with the kids, I drive them to football practice and I run for 1.5 hours while they do the practice, and try to fit it in, or maybe during lunch break, because I work from home, I can fit it in. These days I travel less as well after COVID. I mean, we're mostly on Zoom and Teams meetings. And then also, I mean, usually if we go away, and I try to do a lot of local races to get away from. So Kullamannen is pretty local to me, for example, and there are a few races that are pretty local. But then if we go away, I try to bring also the family, and so I center the whole vacation around the races sometimes as well, for good and for bad. But yeah, the family don't complain too much about going to Chamonix, for example. So. But then also I think you need to be a little bit smart on how you train. So I don't do so many long runs anymore. Maybe the races are, kind of the long runs. So I rarely go out for more than 2-3 hours. And when the kids were smaller, I tried to wake up, in the weekends really early, maybe before. But yeah, sometimes it becomes a little bit of a conflict as well.
Say you're about 4 or 5 weeks out from a race. Do you have a target mileage, or are you just going by feel?
Yeah, I think maybe back in the days I was more looking at the kilometers and target from that perspective. But now, yeah, I don't really have a target like that. I mean, I have typically a plan that I try to follow, but I also try to do some cross training. So biking, for example, that's great when you're injured and so on. Yeah, so I try to move away a little bit from target and go by feel a little bit more. And also, I think traditionally I've been training more long and slow. So, and in the last couple of years, I changed it a little bit to try a little bit more speed as well, and strength training and those kind of things. So today I was actually on the Stairmaster in the gym to just practice on climbing with a weight vest as well.
Oh wow!
So, yeah.
That's some David Goggins stuff right there.
Yeah, it maybe sounds like, but actually it's the Scott Johnson is the coach that he coached Tom and Ruth. They both won UTMB this year. So his thing is muscular endurance. And he wrote a very good book that I can recommend, Uphill Athlete. That used to be like kind of my go-to book. And one of his concepts is this muscular endurance. So different ways of doing it. You can climb a hill, but also a Stairmaster with a weight vest and so on. So yeah, it's not the most fun thing to do, but it makes a difference. So.
How much enjoyment does filming add to your race experience? So if you weren't going to film, would it feel like something's missing?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely. So I got a GoPro maybe when I turned 40 or something like that. I don't know, but it was for one of my birthdays anyway. So my wife gave me this GoPro, and I was like, should I really have this expensive camera? Maybe we should return it instead. And I'm not going to use it. But then I started to film the races. And this is maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. And yeah, I mean, I started to enjoy it. And in the beginning, it was more like I was just, kind of filming people and not really talking to the camera or anything like that. So it evolved over time. And then it became maybe more of a storytelling as well and so on. So, and yeah, it would feel strange if I didn't have the camera with me, for sure. And I think I sometimes use it as well during those long races as a distraction to kind of, talk to people, maybe kind of interview them as we go along, or coming up with, kind of the script, what to say next.
Okay.
So I never prepare any of those things beforehand. And I rarely do any voiceover after either. So I try to capture my experience there in the moment, so to say. And then of course, with editing, you can kind of shape it in a certain way and so on. But but I enjoy the process both during the run, but then also after. So typically my run is not complete until I kind of processed all the footage, because then you kind of relive the race in a way, and you rewatch it, and then I try to do it as quickly as possible. So typically in the week after or something like that, I complete the movie, and then when I kind of published the movie, then it's history, so to say. So, but it's a good way to process, the race, because if I didn't have the film, I wouldn't necessarily remember the race as it was either. I mean, you remember certain fragments maybe, but
If I'm holding a camera, sometimes my mind kind of goes blank and I can't think of what I want to say. But are you imagining a certain person as your audience that you're speaking to?
no, not really. I just talk to the camera.
Are you talking to yourself in the future, or are you talking to your kids to look back on, or your friends?
Um, yeah, I don't know, to be honest. If I talk to, yeah, I never thought about that. But I think I mean, I always did movies more for myself, not to someone else. It's more for myself, I would say.
Okay.
That's how it started off, at least. But I mean, it's always good when you get some feedback on the movies and so on. So yeah, I just try to be true to myself. I don't try to make up to fit certain audience or whatnot.
So this whole time you've been completing all these challenges with type 1 diabetes. Was there a time in your life that you thought that it was going to limit you from doing this type of athletic activity?
Yeah, so when I got diabetes, that came as a shock, of course. But I was, because I remember when I drove into the hospital, I was losing my eyesight. So I
Oh,
couldn't see
wow.
it more or less. I didn't see if it said, on the speed sign, if it said 90 or 70. So then when they said, you have diabetes, and I got the insulin, and then, a few hours later, I got my sight back. So I felt pretty relieved, to be honest. And yeah, I never really felt, I mean, it's not a great thing to have, for sure, but that's my reality. So now I just have to make the best out of it. I guess that's been my approach the whole time. Then it certainly limits you in some ways. I mean, I had to DNF a few times. So one time, so back in the days, we didn't have like insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors. So you basically had to prick your finger and you see where you're at right now, and then you take a shot if it was too high and so on. So it was more difficult to manage, and I remember running the marathons and stuff like that. I had no idea if I was high or low, or because you cannot really feel that. So and it was one in particular where I got problems. It was Stockholm Marathon, maybe 15 years ago or something like that. And I got into a little bit of a trouble. And after that, I got the insulin pump and also this continuous glucose monitor. So I can actually see, the curve of where I'm going, not just where I am right now. So that helped a lot. And I think without those, it would be difficult to run the really long ultra running races, for sure. At least for me, yeah.
Yeah, on the one hand, anyone who's done a race knows that your brain kind of goes into a fog and it's hard to concentrate on its own. And then you have diabetes where if you crash, it kind of feels like you're in this drunk state where it's even harder to concentrate. And then you have to kind of improvise at an aid station and guesstimate how many carbs you're going to put in your body and then match the insulin rate to that. So on the one hand, it's a lot more for you to juggle. But on the other hand, having that constant feedback of the glucose monitor actually helps you in a way diagnose how much nutrition that you have to do and manage that. So in a way, that could kind of help that you have that data feedback.
No, I mean, it's very rare that even because diabetes is something that I will never figure out, even in my everyday life, so to say. I mean, it can be strange, and you cannot really explain why am I high now or why did I get low. So the theory is basically the more carbs you eat, the more insulin you need to take, and then if you do exercise, you need less insulin. But then you have adrenaline, and it's so many factors. So it becomes more or less impossible to really manage. And just every time I eat, I need to look at the plate and judge how many carbs are on that plate. I mean, how easy is that? I mean, it's impossible. So it is difficult. The CGM definitely helps me during the race to see where I'm at. But in most races, I'm not so balanced, to be honest. It's always going wrong at some point, more or less. I think Kullamannen this time was quite okay, but that was one of the few occasions, I would say. Yeah, so it's difficult for sure.
Do you think that the racing has allowed you to have greater insight into managing diabetes than just in your regular life than if you hadn't done any racing?
No, not really. I mean, in everyday life, I try to stay away from carbs, not completely, but I mean, if you minimize it a little bit, it's easier to manage your diabetes. But I mean, I'm not minimizing necessarily the carbs, but I don't eat so much carbs. So maybe 200 grams totally on a day, 200-300 grams. But then in a race setting, you're basically doing 100 grams for each hour. And the only thing that I do is sports drinks and gels. So that's kind of like fueling the fire with gasoline. And it kind of becomes quite explosive. So it's very, yeah. So it's kind of maintaining a fire with gasoline and water during a race. You have to, you put some gasoline onto the fire to get you going. And then you have to keep it down with water. So yeah, it's very, rather than just putting in a little bit of a wooden stick once in a while to keep it going nicely like that. But yeah, so it is a very difficult thing, and I think it varies between people with diabetes as well. So one diabetic is completely different to the next one, and so on. So it's difficult for people to, I think, understand how to manage diabetes from the outside. So even the doctors that I have had over the years, they are typically non-diabetic. So they don't, even if they theoretically understand, how it is, it's difficult for them to actually give you real world advice, so to say. Whereas I have a nurse as well that helps me a little bit, and she's diabetic herself. And then you can have a completely different discussion and sharing experiences, even though everyone's experiences is slightly different when it comes to diabetes.
That sounds like a really great metaphor there, that everyone else has a furnace where they just on regular intervals stoke it with one block of wood, and then what you're doing is you're kind of squirting the bottle of lighter fluid, and then the fire goes up and down.
Yeah. So it's very difficult during a race to maintain that. Also, I mean, the when you eat carbs or sugar, that goes straight into the bloodstream very, very quickly. And then if you go too high and then you inject some insulin, you don't see the effect. Maybe it's 1 hour, 2 hours down the line. So to be able to balance when it's slowly reacting on the insulin, it makes it very difficult, basically. So the way I did it last time, I changed my approach. I mean, I tried many different approaches, but what worked really well at Kullamannen this year was I kind of put it on a pretty high insulin level that was kind of continuously giving me the same level of insulin, so to say. And then I was looking at the, where I was on the CGM, the blood glucose. And then I would basically counterbalance that insulin level with carbs. So if I was going low, then I would do carbs. So I would only do carbs when I was going low. So which makes it, on the other hand, difficult to maybe stick with the strategy of doing 100 grams per hour, because it could be like 1 or 2 hours when you're too high, so you cannot do any energy at all. So yeah, but that at least kept me pretty good in terms of blood glucose levels.
So your most recent GAX video, it's not just a race recap or race vlog. It's really a lot more personal insight into your family dynamic. And I'm sorry to hear that your wife was diagnosed with cancer, but it's really powerful and inspirational the way you guys seem to be coping with that together. Um, can you talk about how that impacted your experience at GAX? And did finishing the race suddenly feel trivial to you, or did it feel even more meaningful?
Yeah, that was a very special. So I mean, well, if we rewind 1 year back, actually, so then my brother's wife got cancer. So so then all the races leading from the beginning of last year was, you kind of have that in the back of your mind, like people close to you fighting bigger struggles than just running 100 miles. But then we were in June, so we were going to, I was going down with the family to Lavaredo. We basically had packed our car, but then we found out that Susanne had cancer, breast cancer. So that completely, we need to cancel everything, of course. And instead of going down to Italy and the mountains, we had to go doing chemo at the hospital. And
Wow.
in the beginning, of course, in a very shocked state. I never really dealt with cancer before. So we didn't really know what it meant at all, but we decided anyway to go away for a couple of days to Österlen, and of course I was able to match that with a 100-mile race. So I'm pretty good at finding the opportunities to run as well. But going into those races, I think I mean, sometimes for some people, I think running 100 miles is to kind of find the darkness a little bit, because we so comfortable in our everyday life. So you want to test your limits and kind of find, your limits, so to say. But this race was very different for me. It was kind of actually getting away from that everyday darkness that the cancer diagnosis was, and just try to enjoy the Swedish summer night but then, of course, I was carrying that with me the whole race as well. The struggles, the real struggles of life, so to say. In particular, my wife then. Yeah, so it was very special. I think every race is kind of an inner journey to a large extent. But this got a different dimension to it for sure. And then also, we were running this. It was a little bit strange, but one of the race organizers, he died from cancer a few months before as well. So the whole race started with a silent minute, and the race director was announcing that today Stefan is going to run. He always wanted to run this race, but you running for him. So, and on the bib, it was photo of Stefan and so on. So that was also something everybody was carrying with them. So it was a lot of those stories at the same time that made it pretty special. And I think it made running easier in a sense. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's you can stop running at any point in time. It's not the real thing, right? It's just we're just playing, so to say. But some people have to actually run those races and actually finish that. I mean, there's no option of an DNF when you're fighting cancer. So so that, from that perspective, it made it pretty easy to run.
How would you say you've used the lessons you've learned from ultra running in terms of resilience and having a positive mindset to kind of cope with this news and cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of, you can compare it a lot to ultra running, because ultra running is like life in a way. You have your highest highs and the lowest lows. And in order to kind of appreciate life in general, I think you also need to have some of the lowest lows and go through those. And it's how you handle the lowest lows that also defines you in a way, right? And then also, I mean, the cancer treatment, it's a lot about just trusting the process. The doctors have a plan for you, and you just need to follow that. It's a long one, so it's like a real ultra race as well. So we started the chemo treatment in June. Susanne did the final chemo treatment, hopefully 2-3 weeks back. She got the surgery yesterday, actually.
Oh, wow.
To remove the tumor, and then we're awaiting the result from that in another 2 weeks. But then the treatment is continuing until mid next year with some additional, it's not chemo treatment, but some other stuff that we need to go and inject like every 3 weeks or so, something like that. So it's a long journey, but you kind of have to do step by step, and try to stay positive, because that's the only thing you can do, and then also trust the process in a way. So and that you need to do in ultra running as well. So even when you have your lowest low, you have to trust that it's going to get better, because it usually does. So even when you have your lowest low, you're going to manage to get through that, and you're going to have a better time, hopefully, after a while, and so on. So in general, having a positive mind. So if it's any kind of difficult thing you're facing, having a positive mind and just putting a smile on your face, that's going to help you a long way. And I think one thing more connected to ultra running, if it needs to come from within, that you really want to do it, it's not to prove anyone else, but when you really have a strong why, or whatever you want to call it, then you have a better probability of success. And having a positive mind as well.
Yeah, you're usually the center of attention as a runner, with a support crew and aid station volunteers. So what's it like for you to switch places and now you're in the role of the supporter?
Yeah, no, I mean, the supporter is very important as well. So, and I try to be the best support I can, of course. Yeah, so but sometimes you feel like it would be great to do even more, but it's only so much you can do as well, so to say. But I try to support the best way I can. Yeah, and it's good to give back as well. So I got a lot of support from the family, for sure.
One of the quotes that stands out from your video is you say that in life's hardest challenges, a smile will carry you a long way. And I've noticed that one of the things that makes you stand out with your race vlogs is that you're always joking around with your fellow runners and with the aid station volunteers. How important is it, do you think, that your sense of humor as a kind of a superpower to you, even more than your athletic abilities?
Well, I think that, I mean, it's all about staying positive, and if you can put a smile on someone else's face, they're going to smile back, and that kind of gives you energy back as well. So I try always to, I mean, if you can joke a little bit, it makes life easier in general, and also during the hard times of ultra running.
And then really the central theme of your Gax video is to live life to the fullest. You have to experience the highest highs and the lowest lows. But it seems like everyone else is like designing their whole life to try to avoid those lows. So when did you learn that lesson? Did you learn that this year, or have you been living like that for the past 7 years?
Yeah, I think, I mean, ultra running, and I think sometimes I kind of go into those races also to experience a little bit of the darkness, because we don't really experience that in real life that often, which is maybe a good thing, but it gives you perspective, and I think that perspective is very important. So that, because then when you're at the lowest low, you can basically appreciate that someone give you a glass of water. I mean, something very simple, or just standing in the middle of the night and cheering you on. I mean, that could be, you know, put a smile on your face, and then it makes it easy again, so to say. So to appreciate the small things in life, I think that then you need to experience the lowest lows sometimes as well. So I think that's always been with me, but maybe this year I was not necessarily, because it's been a shitty year, the whole year pretty much for me. So I wasn't really going in and looking for I was more looking for the highs, so to say, and there are many highs, of course, in ultra as well. So, leading up to the start, you get some excitement, and then when you start going, you with a lot of runners, and there might be a lot of people out cheering, and then maybe the sunrise could be another high, and when you're approaching the finish, it's definitely a high as well. So there are a lot of highs in running ultra as well. And at the end of the day, I guess that's the big takeaway. But I think also it's good to explore the lowest lows sometime.
Yeah, out of all of your races, I'm really intrigued to try GAX at some part in my life, because that sunset period seems to extend all the way to sunrise, and the ocean kind of blends with the gradient of the sky, and you have that flat sea. Just seems like it's going on endlessly. Does anything else compare to that scene that you're running into in GAX?
But the Swedish summer nights are pretty nice like that, because it doesn't. Well, maybe in August it gets a little bit darker. So if you in June, July, you barely don't get so much darkness, and it's still kind of warm and nice during the night, and it's pretty short. So yeah, it's a pretty special feeling. So it's very different from Kullamannen, because Kullamannen is all about a very, very long night, a very, very dark night, and cold and so on. So yeah, so running in the Swedish summer night is truly special for sure.
So what keeps drawing you back to Kullamannen? Is there something beyond just trying to get that new status of the different ring for each year that you complete it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I usually tell myself that I should never run it again. But I think it may be different factors. It's kind of a local race, so it's pretty close by. It's also in November, so it's not so many other races conflicting with it. So it's kind of a nice last race for the season. And also it's a lot of people, so it's a lot of people that so it's just nice from a social perspective as well. And another aspect of it, they actually changed the course like every second year or whatever. So it's never going to be exactly the same. So it is a new experience. So I think, and it's a big race for sure. And it's a little bit special to me because I run it so many times as well. So I did sign up already for next year as well.
And do you get a special prize for that one? Do you get platinum?
Next year maybe it's my 7th finish or something like that. So it's no special ring now until the 10th finish when they say it's going to be a platinum. But it's a nice race. But and it becomes a little bit like a Christmas tradition, for ultra runners. the yearly tradition of running Kullamannen. So
you've proven you can do it. So when it gets really hard, what will be your why in finishing it again?
Yeah, no, that's a little bit of a problem. So last year I actually set out to do it in sub 20 hours. So that was approaching the race in a different way. Now I ran into some diabetes problems and other things. So I did actually DNF that race. So what happened was also when I kind of wasn't believing in the sub 20 hour target anymore. It was still maybe 40K to go or something like that. Then my body just shut down completely, and I couldn't move basically. And then I got picked up by a bus. And as soon as I stepped into that bus, I felt pretty good. But I was beyond that 20-hour target, and that was the only. I mean, there was no target of just finishing, just get another ring, just get the stones or whatever. But it was all about that 20-hour. But it was fun to try that as a different approach. But it's maybe not the smartest way of racing if you actually want to finish. You always need to have a plan B and maybe not be so aggressive.
And so you've completed UTMB, but then I watched your video on the Marbella Epic Trail, and you actually
Mhm.
seem surprised at the difficulty of it, the
Yeah,
technicality of the terrain, and I think kind of the how rocky it was. Can you talk about the challenges of that race?
yeah, sure. So I mean, that's a great race. It's up to the Sierra Blanca, is it?
Hmm.
Yeah, and La Concha is behind Marbella, so it's a very nice area. Uh, and last year I did this Marbella Epic Trail, as it called. So it's 60K, and I don't remember the vert, but it's like 4,000 at least. I mean, it's a lot of vert for that distance, maybe even more. So it's much tougher than UTMB, for example. It's much more technical, both uphill and downhill, and it's a lot of vert. So if that was a 100-mile race, that would take me, 50 plus hours. But now it's 60K, but it probably took me 15 hours or something like that. And I mean, it's not really a running race in a way, because I was just hiking the whole race more or less. So it was very little running, I would say. But I mean, it's beautiful trails and it's very hard. It's very nice down to earth organization as well. And so I'm actually coming back. I was meant to run the same race next year
Hmm.
in February in a few weeks, but I realized, because I applied to the Marbella Epic Trail, but then I realized like this school holiday is actually the week before next year, so to say. So, but then they have this other race the weekend before, which is called Destroyer. I think that's 40K and 3,000 something meters of elevation. So I'm going to do that this time
It
instead.
sounds like it's a less distance, but not to be underestimated. It's
No,
still.
I'm sure it's going to be super tough as well.
Hey guys, if you'd like to follow Marcus along on his 100-mile journeys, you'll find a link to his YouTube channel below. And if you made it this far, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on our weekly content. And if you'd like to book your own Outdoor Journal approved adventure to Sweden, log on to the Outdoor Voyage right now and check out one of our immersive wilderness adventures with Wild Sweden. Thanks for listening to the Outdoor Journal podcast.